What if the woman who came to marry him was not the bride he wrote to, but a stranger carrying his last letter? Elias Boone had given up on love until Claire arrived with another woman's name, a worn carpet bag, and a secret she was afraid to speak. If he sends her away, she may have nowhere left to go. If he lets her stay, the whole town may turn against them both. And when the truth inside the letter is finally revealed, everything he believed about love will change. This is a story about a lonely rancher, a woman with nowhere to go, and a letter that looked like a mistake, but became the first sign of home. Before the end, that same letter will reveal why love does not always arrive in the name we expect. The wrong woman at the station. Elias Boone saw the train before he heard it. It came through the dry Kansas wind like a dark line of smoke, cutting across the flat land toward the little town of Mercy Creek. He stood on the wooden platform with his hat in his hands and dust on his boots. He had not dressed fine. Elias Boone did not own fine clothes, but he had washed his shirt twice, shaved his face clean, and tied a black ribbon around the small bundle of wildflowers in his hand. The flowers were already wilting in the heat. He turned the stems in his rough hands as if careful fingers could keep one small hope alive a little longer. In his coat pocket was a copy of the letter he had sent 3 weeks before. His last letter. He had told himself it would be the final one. If Martha Keene did not come west after that, he would stop asking life for a wife, a family, or a warm voice in his empty cabin. The train slowed, steam hissed, doors opened, families stepped down first, then a cattle buyer, then a thin old man with a cane, then a young woman in a gray traveling dress holding a worn carpetbag against her chest. Elias looked past her. He waited for a woman in a blue bonnet. That was what Martha had written. "I will wear a blue bonnet, so you will know me." But no woman in a blue bonnet came. The conductor called for final baggage. The gray-dressed woman remained on the platform. Her face was pale from travel. Her eyes were tired but steady. In one gloved hand, she held an envelope folded soft at the edges. Elias knew that envelope. His name was written across it in his own hand. The woman stepped toward him. "Mr. Elias Boone." His throat tightened. "Yes, ma'am." She held out the letter. "I believe this belongs to you." Elias stared at her. "Where is Martha Keene?" The woman lowered her eyes for only a moment. Then she said the words that made the whole station go quiet inside him. "I am sorry, sir. I am not Martha." And in that moment, Elias Boone understood that the woman who had come with his last letter was not the woman he had asked for. But she was the only one who had come. But the letter in Clara's hand was not only proof of a mistake. It carried a secret from the woman who never came. A rancher who had stopped hoping Mercy Creek, Kansas, 1878, was not the kind of place that made promises. It was a small town made of dust, hard work, and weathered wood. The church bell had a crack in it. The general store had more empty shelves than full ones. The road turned to mud in spring, stone in summer, and ice in winter. Elias Boone lived 4 miles beyond town where the prairie opened wide and the wind had nothing to stop it. His ranch was small but honest. 20 cattle, 3 horses, a milk cow, a barn he had built with his own hands, a cabin with 2 rooms, 1 bed, 1 table, and 1 extra chair that had not been used in years. That extra chair was why he had written to the marriage office in St. Louis. Not because he wanted a servant, not because he needed someone to cook. Elias could cook badly enough to live. He could mend shirts, chop wood, haul water, and survive another winter alone. But surviving was not the same as living. At night, he would sit at the table and see that empty chair across from him. Some nights he still set his eyes on that chair before he remembered there was no one to answer him. So he wrote, first to the marriage office, then to Martha Keene. Her letters had been careful and polite. She was a widow. She wanted a quiet life. She said she could keep house, read scripture, and help with hens. She did not speak much of love, but Elias did not blame her. Love was a large word for two strangers. Still, in his last letter, he had written more than he meant to. He had written that he could not promise riches or soft days, but he could promise a clean home, honest work, and a man who would never raise his hand or his voice against her. He told her he had lived too long with silence, and that he hoped, if she was willing, they might build a life where two people did not have to be lonely anymore. After sending that letter, Elias had regretted it. It sounded too open, too needy, too much like hope. Now the wrong woman stood before him with that same letter in her hand. Her name was Clara Whitcomb. She told him in a low voice that Martha Keene had not boarded the train in St. Louis. She sent me instead, Clara said. Elias's jaw tightened. A woman does not send another woman to be married in her place. I know. Then why are you here? Clara looked down at the letter again. Because she said you were a good man, she whispered, and because I had nowhere else to go. The wilting flowers hung from Elias's hand. He looked at the woman. She was not dressed like someone trying to trick a man. Her gloves were patched. Her shoes were worn thin at the toes. Her face carried fear, but not lies. Still, fear could hide many things. Miss Whitcomb, he said carefully, you understand what this means. Yes, I cannot marry you. She nodded once, as if she had already expected the blow. I understand. The train whistle screamed behind her. Elias looked at the empty track, the fading smoke, and the woman left standing in a town that had not invited her. Then Mrs. Abigail Pike, who ran the boarding house, leaned from the station steps and said loudly, Well, Elias, are you taking that girl or leaving her here for the rest of us to wonder about? Clara's cheeks turned red. Elias looked at the letter in her hand, the last letter he had ever meant to send, and he knew the whole town was already watching. Elias thought he was looking at a stranger, but Clara already knew one thing about his heart that the whole town did not. Clara Whitcomb had not planned to become anyone's mistake. For most of her 26 years, she had been useful but unwanted. She had lived in a crowded house in Missouri with an aunt who reminded her daily that charity was a burden. Clara sewed for neighbors, cared for sick children, and read letters for women whose husbands had gone west and never returned. Clara had learned early that a quiet woman could be forgotten in a room full of people. That was how she met Martha Keene. Martha was older than Clara by almost 10 years, with tired eyes and a cough that stayed through spring. She had answered Elias Boone's marriage notice because she wanted safety. But when Elias's last letter came, something in it frightened her. Not because it was cruel, because it was kind. Martha had wept after reading it. He deserves a whole woman, she told Clara. Not one half buried already. Clara had not understood. 2 days before the train left, Martha's cough worsened. She pressed Elias's letter into Clara's hand. Go west, Martha said. Clara shook her head. I cannot. You can. You must. He is expecting you, and he will be angry. He has the right to be. But you tell him the truth. Tell him I could not come. Tell him I was sorry. Clara tried to give the letter back, but Martha closed her fingers around it. You have no home here, Clara. You have a good heart and no place to put it. Maybe God made this road crooked because both of you needed it." Martha died the next morning. Clara sold her sewing machine to pay for a black dress and a train ticket. She carried no wedding dress, no hope chest, and no promise except the one she had made to a dying woman. "Tell him I was sorry." Now she stood in Mercy Creek with dust on her skirt and grief in her throat. Elias did not know any of that yet. All he knew was that she had come in Martha's place. "I can pay for a room," Clara said, though both of them knew it might not be true. Mrs. Pike gave a small laugh from the station steps. "With what?" "That carpet bag." Elias turned his head toward the widow. "That is enough, Mrs. Pike." The sharpness in his voice surprised Clara. It surprised Elias, too. He looked back at Clara. "There is a boarding house." Mrs. Pike folded her arms. "Full." Elias knew it was not full. The town knew it, too. But nobody said so. Clara lifted her chin. "I can sleep at the church if the pastor allows it." "The pastor's away until Sunday," someone muttered. A silence fell. Elias looked toward the road that led to his ranch. 4 miles of open prairie. A cabin meant for a bride who had not come. A town ready to turn this woman into a story before supper. He did not want trouble, but his mother had raised him better than to leave a woman alone on a train platform with no place to sleep. "You can stay at my cabin tonight," he said. "I will sleep in the barn. Tomorrow we will decide what comes next." Clara's eyes widened. "I do not wish to cause scandal." "Scandal has already found us," Elias said. "We may as well give it a chair by the fire." For the first time, Clara almost smiled, but as Elias lifted her carpet bag, the last letter slipped from her hand and fell open on the platform. The wind caught it. Before Clara could reach it, Mrs. Pike picked it up. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she looked at Clara with cold interest. "Well," the widow said, "this is not just a letter. This sounds like a proposal." The town grew still again, and when the wind opened that letter on the station platform, Clara knew her secret might be taken from her before she was ready to speak it. If you were Elias, standing on that platform with the wrong woman holding your last letter, would you send her away or hear her story first? The first night at the cabin, Elias took the letter from Mrs. Pike without a word. He folded it once, then handed it back to Clara. "No one here has business reading a private letter." Mrs. Pike sniffed. "Private? A woman comes to town pretending to be a bride, and you call it private." She did not pretend. "Then what do you call it?" Elias looked at Clara. Her face was pale, but she did not hide behind him. "I call it a misunderstanding," he said. Mrs. Pike's mouth tightened. "Mercy Creek will call it what it is." Elias did not answer. He led Clara away from the station. The road to the ranch was quiet. He rode beside the wagon while Clara sat with her carpetbag at her feet. The sky was wide and gold. The prairie grass moved like water. But neither of them spoke for nearly a mile. At last, Clara said, "You should not have defended me." Elias kept his eyes on the road. "I defended the truth." "You do not know the truth." "No," he said, "but I know cruelty when I hear it." That ended the conversation. When they reached the cabin, Clara saw the life Elias had built alone. The fence was straight. The woodpile was neat. The barn door had been mended with care. There were no flowers, no curtains, no soft signs of a woman's hand. But everything was clean. It was not a beautiful home, but it was an honest one. Every nail looked driven by a man who had stopped asking anyone else for help. Inside the cabin, the table held 2 plates. Clara noticed them. Elias noticed her noticing. "I set them this morning," he said, "before I knew." He took one plate away too quickly. Clara felt a strange ache in her chest. He showed her the small bedroom. "You can sleep here. I will be in the barn. I cannot take your bed." "You can. I am not your wife." "No," Elias said quietly, "but you are a guest under my roof." She wanted to argue, but the weariness in her bones stopped her. That night, Clara could not sleep. The cabin held too much silence. Moonlight lay across the floor. Somewhere outside, a horse shifted in the barn. Clara sat up and saw Elias's last letter on the chair beside her bed. She had read it many times on the train, not because it belonged to her, because its kindness had frightened her too. A man who could write such words was not a man she wished to hurt. She picked up the letter and turned it over. She had read the front of the letter many times, but the words on the back were the reason she had truly come. On the back, in Martha's weak hand, were the words Clara had not yet shown him. "Clara, if he is the man this letter says he is, tell him I am sorry. And if he cannot forgive me, ask him to forgive you. You did not take my place. I gave it to you." Clara pressed the paper to her heart. By morning, she would have to show him. By morning, he might send her away. But before dawn came, a sound rose from outside. A low, sharp cry, then another. Clara went to the window and saw Elias running from the barn toward the pasture with a lantern in his hand. Something was wrong, and without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and followed him into the dark. By morning, Clara meant to tell Elias the truth, but the prairie had a different test waiting in the dark. The town turns against her. One of Elias's mares had broken through a weak stretch of fence and cut her leg on wire. The animal trembled in the lantern light, eyes wide, breath white in the cold morning air. Elias spoke softly as he moved closer. "Easy, girl. Easy now." Clara stood near the fence, holding the lantern high. "Tell me what to do," she said. Elias glanced at her. "You have handled horses." "No." "But I have handled frightened children. I imagine fear is fear." For the first time since the station, Elias looked at her with something other than caution. "Hold the light steady." She did. The mare kicked once. Elias moved fast, but not fast enough. The hoof struck his shoulder and knocked him into the dirt. Clara gasped. Elias pushed himself up, jaw tight with pain. "Stay back," he warned. But Clara had already seen the strip of cloth in his hand. She tore a piece from the hem of her petticoat, stepped closer, and spoke to the mare in a low, steady voice. "You poor thing," she whispered. "You did not mean to hurt anyone. You were only scared." The mare's ears twitched. Elias stared as Clara kept talking. Her voice did not shake. Her hand did not rush. Slowly, the mare stilled enough for Elias to bind the wound. When it was over, the eastern sky had turned gray. Elias stood, holding his shoulder. "You did well," he said. Clara looked down at her torn dress. So did she. He almost smiled. By noon, they had to go into town for medicine and wire. Clara hoped the morning's trouble might make the day easier between them. But Mercy Creek had already made up its mind. Inside the general store, whispers followed her. "That is the one," came with another woman's letter. Poor Elias. Or foolish Elias. Mrs. Pike stood near the counter speaking loudly enough for Clara to hear. A decent woman does not travel across 3 states to surprise a man at the altar. Clara's hands tightened around the medicine bottle. Elias stepped beside her. There was no altar. Mrs. Pike raised an eyebrow. Not yet. The storekeeper looked away. A young boy, Tommy Pike, stood near a barrel of flour, watching Clara with open curiosity. His sleeve was torn. His face was dirty. He looked as if he wanted to ask a question but had been taught not to. Clara knelt and smiled gently. "You have a tear there." Tommy looked at his sleeve. "My ma says there's no use mending it. I'll only rip it again." "That may be true," Clara said, "but a thing can be worth mending more than once." The boy held out his arm. Clara took a small needle from her bag and mended the sleeve right there in the store. The whispering stopped for a moment. Mrs. Pike watched with a face that did not soften but did not speak either. When Clara finished, Tommy touched the neat stitches. "Thank you, ma'am." Clara smiled. "You are welcome." Outside, Elias loaded the supplies into the wagon. "You did not have to do that," he said. "No," Clara replied, but he looked like a boy who needed someone to notice. Elias said nothing. On the ride home, he looked at her more than once. That evening, Clara placed the last letter on the table between them. "I need to show you something," she said. Elias looked at the envelope. His face closed again. What more can that letter say? Clara turned it over, and Elias saw Martha's handwriting. That evening, when Clara placed the letter between them, Elias believed he was about to hear another excuse. Instead, he saw a dead woman's handwriting. The truth inside the letter. For a long moment, Elias did not touch the paper. The cabin fire cracked softly. The wind pressed against the walls. Clara stood on one side of the table, waiting for him to read the truth that might end everything. At last, Elias picked up the letter. He read the words on the back. Once, then again. His hand tightened around the paper. "She died?" he asked. Clara nodded. "The morning after she gave me your letter." Elias looked toward the dark window. Clara's voice stayed gentle. "She wanted you to know she was sorry." "Why did you not tell me at the station?" "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would think I came to take what was hers." Elias looked back at her. "Did you?" The question was quiet, but it cut. Clara drew a breath. "No, I came because she asked me to. I came because I had no home. But I did not come to steal your name, your house, or your trust." Elias looked down at the letter again. The first side held his hope. The back held Martha's goodbye. Between those two sides stood Clara, a woman sent by grief, carried by need, and judged by everyone, including him. "I do not know what to do with this," he said. "Neither do I." The honesty in her answer made the room feel smaller. Elias sat slowly. "My father ordered my mother from a marriage notice," he said, surprising both of them. "He treated her like a hired hand, like she owed him gratitude for a roof. I swore I would never be that kind of man." "You are not. You do not know me." "I know enough." His eyes lifted. Clara spoke carefully. "You slept in a barn so I could have a door between me and the world. You defended me in town when you had no reason to. You saved your horse with patience instead of anger. That tells me enough." Elias looked away. No one had spoken of him that way in years. Not kindly. Not as if his quiet was something more than coldness. Clara reached for the letter, but he kept it in his hand. "I should leave tomorrow," she said. His eyes returned to her. "Where would you go?" "I do not know." "That is not an answer." "It is the only one I have." The fire fell low. Elias folded the letter and placed it on the table. "You may stay until Sunday," he said. "The pastor will return. We can speak with him, make things proper or clear, whichever they need to be." Clara nodded, though her heart felt unsteady. Until Sunday. 4 days. 4 days to live in a home that was not hers. 4 days beside a man who had not asked for her. 4 days before the last letter decided both their futures. But outside, far beyond the cabin light, dark clouds were gathering over the prairie, and Mercy Creek was about to need them both. 4 days stood between them and Sunday, but before the pastor could judge the letter, the storm would judge their hearts. The storm on the prairie. The storm came on Friday. It began as a yellow sky and a strange stillness in the grass. By afternoon, the wind rose hard enough to bend the cottonwoods near the creek. Elias stood outside the barn looking north. Clara came to the porch. "Is it bad?" "Could be." That was all he said, but his face told her more. By dusk, rain struck the cabin like thrown stones. Thunder rolled over the prairie. The cattle pressed against the fence, restless and afraid. Then came the pounding at the door. Elias opened it to find Tommy Pike soaked to the skin, crying so hard he could barely speak. "Ma sent me," the boy gasped. "The creek's rising. Our wagon's stuck. My little sister's sick. Ma says please." Elias was already reaching for his coat. Clara grabbed her shawl. "You stay here," he said. "No. This is not your fight. A sick child in a flood is everyone's fight." He wanted to argue. There was no time. They rode out in the wagon with lanterns swinging and rain blinding the road. Clara held the medicine box in her lap. The last letter was tucked inside her coat, close to her heart. She did not know why she had brought it. Maybe because it had carried her this far. Maybe because she was afraid the cabin would be empty when she returned. They found Mrs. Pike's wagon half sunk near the creek crossing. Mrs. Pike stood in the rain holding a small girl wrapped in a blanket. Her proud face was gone. Fear had taken its place. "She's burning," the widow cried. And the wheel broke. Elias jumped down. "Get them into my wagon." The creek roared behind them. Clara climbed down and took the child. The little girl's skin was hot as fire. "She needs dry clothes and cool cloths," Clara said. "Now." Mrs. Pike looked at her as if she wanted to refuse help from the woman she had judged. Then thunder cracked overhead, and pride gave way to terror. "Please," she whispered. Clara held the child close. "I have her." The water rose fast. Elias worked to free the wagon horse, but the animal panicked. The mud sucked at his boots. Rain ran down his face. The creek had begun to spill over the bank. "Elias!" Clara shouted. He did not turn. He cut the harness with his knife just as the broken wagon shifted toward the water. The horse stumbled free, but Elias slipped. For one terrible second, the flood pulled him to his knees. Clara handed the child to Mrs. Pike and ran. She reached the edge of the bank and stretched out her arm. "Elias!" He looked up. Water struck his side. His hand caught hers. Clara planted her feet in the mud and pulled with everything she had. She was not strong enough alone. Tommy grabbed her waist. Mrs. Pike grabbed Tommy. Together, they pulled Elias from the rising creek. He landed hard in the mud, coughing. Clara fell beside him, shaking. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elias looked at her. Rain covered his face, but his eyes were clear. "You should have stayed back," he said. Clara's voice trembled. "And let the last good man in Mercy Creek wash away." Elias stared at her. The storm roared around them, but something quiet passed between them that no thunder could break. When Clara pulled Elias from the flood, Mercy Creek saw more than courage. It saw the woman they had called a mistake become the only reason he was still alive, the choice to stay or leave. By morning, Mercy Creek knew what had happened. Mrs. Pike told it herself. She told how Elias Boone drove into the storm without question. She told how Clara Whitcomb held her fevered child like a mother. She told how the woman everyone had judged ran into floodwater to pull Elias back. By noon, the whispers changed. Not all of them. Towns change slowly, but enough. At the church on Sunday, Pastor Bell returned to find the whole matter waiting for him, like a pot ready to boil over. By then, the whole town had an opinion. Mrs. Pike had her pride. Clara had her fear. Elias had the letter in his hands. And in a few quiet minutes, one answer would decide whether Clara left Mercy Creek alone or finally heard someone ask her to stay. Elias and Clara sat on opposite ends of the same pew. Between them lay the last letter. Pastor Bell read both sides. He took a long breath. "Well," he said, "this is a sorrowful road." Elias nodded. Clara kept her hands folded. The pastor looked at her. "Miss Whitcomb, did you come here intending to deceive Mr. Boone?" "No, sir." "Did you ask to take Martha Keene's place?" "No, sir." "Did you come under her request?" "Yes." Then he looked at Elias. "And you, Mr. Boone, do you feel bound to marry this woman because she arrived with your letter?" Elias answered too quickly. "No." Clara felt the word like a door closing. Pastor Bell heard it too. He nodded. Then no marriage should take place today. Clara looked down. She had expected this. Still, expectation did not stop pain. The pastor continued, "But there remains the matter of Miss Whitcomb's safety." "I will take the afternoon stage east," Clara said. Elias turned sharply. "With what money?" "I have a little." "You do not have enough." "I can work along the way." "That is not a plan, Clara." It was the first time he had used her name with feeling. She looked at him. The church was silent. Elias seemed to realize everyone was listening, but he did not look away. For the first time, Elias looked less like a man protecting his pride and more like a man afraid of losing the only peace he had found. "I am not asking you to marry me because of a letter," he said. Clara's throat tightened. "I know. I am asking you not to leave because of fear." Her lips parted. Elias looked down at the paper between them. "I spent years thinking a home was something I had to build before anyone could enter it. But you came into mine by mistake, and somehow it has been less empty ever since." Mrs. Pike wiped at one eye and pretended it was dust. Clara whispered, "Elias." He shook his head gently. "I cannot offer you love like a poem. I do not know how. But I can offer truth. I would rather spend one honest day with the wrong woman than a lifetime waiting for the right one who never came." The church held its breath. What would you do in Clara's place? Leave with your pride, or stay in a town that had already judged your name? Clara looked at the last letter, then at the man who had written it, the man who had lost hope and still made room for her. "I will not marry you out of pity," she said softly. "Good. I will not stay as a burden. You are not one. And I will not be Martha's shadow." Elias's voice was low. "No, you are Clara." That was when the tears came to her eyes, not because he had asked, because he had finally seen her. Elias had finally spoken her name like it belonged in his life. But Clara still had to decide if she could stay without becoming another woman's shadow, the bride who became a home. They did not marry that day. Clara stayed at Mrs. Pike's boarding house for 1 week because Mercy Creek had to see that the choice was clean and free. During that week, Elias came to town each morning, not with flowers, not with pretty speeches. He came with small, steady acts. He brought firewood for the boarding house. He fixed the loose step where Tommy had tripped. He delivered eggs from his hens. He spoke to Clara in the open street, where everyone could see he was not ashamed of her. Clara worked too. She mended shirts, helped at the church, and sat with Mrs. Pike's little girl until the fever passed. She did not try to win the town with charm. She simply served until the sharp edges around her began to soften. On the 7th evening, Elias found her on the boarding house porch. The last letter rested in her lap. "I thought you might have burned that by now," he said. She smiled faintly. "I thought about it." "Why didn't you?" "Because it brought me here." He sat in the chair beside her, leaving a proper space between them. "I wrote another letter once," he said. "To whom?" "To no one. I wrote it after my mother died. I told her I was sorry I could not give her an easier life." Clara listened quietly. "I buried it behind the cabin," he continued, "under the cottonwood. I suppose I thought grief needed a place to go." Clara looked toward the darkening street. Maybe love does too. Elias turned his hat in his hands. "I spoke to Pastor Bell." Her heart began to beat faster. "He said if we both choose it freely, he will marry us next Sunday." Clara looked at him. "And do you choose it freely?" she asked. Elias met her eyes. "Yes." She searched his face. There was no pressure there, no demand, no wounded pride, only hope, careful and humble. "I am not Martha," she said. "I know. I may never be the wife you imagined. I have found I am not fond of imagining any more." That made her laugh softly. Elias's face warmed at the sound. Then Clara folded the letter and placed it in his hand. "Then keep this until Sunday." "Why?" "Because if we stand before God and this town, I want that letter there, not as a chain, as a witness." Elias closed his fingers around it. The next Sunday, the church was full. Clara wore a simple cream dress. Mrs. Pike altered herself. Elias wore the same clean shirt from the train station. There were no grand flowers, no music beyond a small hymn, and no family except the kind a hard town slowly becomes. When Pastor Bell asked if anyone objected, no one spoke. Mrs. Pike looked ready to slap anyone who tried. Elias and Clara made their vows, not because a letter had forced them, because mercy had led them through a mistake and left them with a choice. When Elias slipped a plain silver ring onto Clara's finger, his hand trembled. Only she saw, and she loved him more for it. The letter had brought her to Mercy Creek as the wrong bride. Now it would stand beside them as the witness to a choice no mistake could explain. The last letter finds its ending. The cabin changed slowly after Clara came home. Curtains appeared first, made from flour sacks washed soft and stitched with tiny blue flowers. Then herbs hung near the window. Then a quilt folded over the chair that had once sat empty across from Elias. But the last letter stayed on the mantel. Clara placed it there inside a small wooden frame Elias made from barn scraps. At first, Elias did not like seeing it every day. It reminded him of waiting, of disappointment, of standing on the train platform with wilting flowers and a heart that felt foolish. But Clara saw it differently. To her, the letter was a door. A strange door, yes, a painful door, but still the one through which she had entered her life. Winter came early that year. Snow covered the prairie and softened the hard lines of the ranch. At night, Elias and Clara sat by the fire. Sometimes she sewed. Sometimes he carved small toys for Tommy Pike and his sister. Sometimes they said very little, because silence was no longer empty when it was shared. One evening, near Christmas, Clara found Elias standing by the mantel. He held the framed letter in his hands. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No." He removed the paper carefully. Clara watched him take a pencil from the shelf. "What are you doing?" "Finishing it." She came closer. On the front of the letter were the words he had written to Martha months before. On the back were Martha's final words to Clara. There was almost no room left, but at the bottom, In the narrow, white space beneath both their stories, Elias wrote one line. He did not write many words. He never had. But the few he added carried every lonely supper, every empty chair, every mile Clara had traveled, and every judgment they had survived. Then he handed it to Clara. Her eyes moved over his careful letters. The wrong bride came with my last letter, and she became the first true home my heart ever knew. Clara covered her mouth. The room blurred through tears. Elias looked uncertain, as if he had done something too bold. I thought it needed an ending, he said. Clara pressed the letter to her heart, just as she had done the night she first slept in his cabin. It has one now. For the first time, the letter was not a wound. It was not a mistake. It was their beginning. Years later, when children's laughter filled the cabin and the second chair was no longer empty, the letter still rested on the mantel. Visitors sometimes asked about it. Clara would smile and say, "That is the letter that brought me here." And Elias, older now, with silver in his dark hair, would always add, "No, that is the letter that brought me home." Because some stories begin with the wrong train, the wrong name, and the wrong expectation. Some begin with grief folded into paper. Some begin with a woman standing alone on a dusty platform carrying a letter meant for someone else. But love, when it is honest, does not always arrive the way a person asks for it. Sometimes it arrives tired from travel, holding a worn carpet bag, with fear in its eyes and courage in its hands. Sometimes it comes as a mistake. And sometimes, if two wounded hearts are brave enough to open the door, the wrong bride becomes the answer to the last letter a lonely man ever had to write. The end. If this story of a lonely rancher, a wrong bride, and a letter that found its way home touched your heart, there is another forgotten Old West love story waiting for you. In the next story, a mail-order bride finds her husband's first wife's hidden letter, and the words inside may change their marriage forever. Choose the next story, and let the frontier open one more secret.